Welcome to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie. After learning a ton about kidney stones and helping people prevent stones at the University of Chicago, I was fed up with all the terrible advice people were finding online. So I decided to do something about it. The Kidney Dietitian was born. This podcast is for people who want to learn what actually works to prevent kidney stones and still enjoy life, eating, and their favorite foods. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to episode 96 of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. As always, I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts. Today, I'm diving into a quick question because I get this often, which is sugar, and what is the connection and how exactly does sugar cause kidney stones? I think this is one of the aspects of nutrition that we think about least often when we think about kidney stone nutrition, right? We think about salts quite a bit, we think about calcium, we think about protein, right? These things. But sugar sometimes is often forgotten, yet it is a very, very important part of kidney stone prevention for some people, of course, depending on your 24-hour urine test. So we see in study after study that people who consume a lot of added sugar, and especially a lot of added sugar from sugary drinks, so from things like regular soda, sweet tea, lemonade, regular lemonade, what else? Like Kool-Aid, punch, like any sort of sugary drink, sugary coffee drinks, whatever it is. All of these things are pretty strongly associated with kidney stones. We know that people who consume more of these sugary drinks, and also added sugar in general, but like I said, that association with sugary drinks is especially strong. These people tend to have more kidney stones. So of course, we know that sugar isn't great for us in general, right? Eating a lot of added sugar, right? Like we know that can increase our risk of things like heart disease as well as hypertension and these types of things. But what in the world does sugar have to do with kidney stones? And today on the podcast, I'm going to do my best to explain why that association likely exists. And when we think about sugar and kidney stones from a urine chemistry level, it really comes down to urine calcium as well as oxalate, which I think is really interesting. So we know that likely acutely, so very shortly after you consume a lot of sugar, your urine calcium likely goes up, or it does go up. And we know that by far the biggest driver of kidney stones for most people is actually higher urine calcium. So that is likely sort of part of the driver. And I'm saying this all a little bit wishy-washy because we honestly don't fully understand the mechanism of how exactly all this added sugar relates to higher urine calcium. And some of my previous colleagues at the University of Chicago are actually trying to answer this exact question. But we do know that it exists. We know that when you eat a lot of sugar, your urine calcium tends to go up. So likely this higher urine calcium is driving more kidney stones in people who eat a lot of sugar. And so for that reason, I teach my students in kidney stone nutrition school, if you do have high urine calcium, if you discover from your urine test that you do have high urine calcium, that one of the things we want to be cautious of is eating too much sugar, because we of course don't want to exacerbate that higher urine calcium by eating a lot of added sugar. The other likely reason that eating a lot of sugar can cause kidney stones is actually oxalate, because even though a lot of very sugary foods, things like cake or ice cream or candy, have very little oxalate in them, sugar itself is going to be essentially oxalate free. Typically these foods are not especially high in oxalate, yet eating a lot of sugar can actually drive up your urine oxalate, which is why I endlessly say, if you've been around me for more than 3 days, you know that I do not love a low oxalate diet. And this is one of the many reasons, because it just massively oversimplifies the picture, and also has you focusing on all sorts of things that really are not going to prevent kidney stones. We know that eating less sugar can help prevent stones. There is actually no data out there that shows that eating low oxalate can prevent stones, but I digress. That is a whole other topic. But for today, I think it's really interesting to really dive into how in the world eating sugar, which is oxalate free, can increase the amount of oxalate in your urine. And it has to do with your liver and the fact that your liver actually makes quite a bit of oxalate every day. In fact, it's going to vary quite a bit from person to person, but the amount of oxalate that your liver makes, or the oxalate that your liver is producing every single day, can account for up to 80% of the oxalate in your urine, which is huge. Like I said, that varies quite a bit from person to person, But I think that's just really crazy to think that the oxalate that you're eating is so minimal. It's a maximum of say like 20% of the of the oxalate that's found in your urine. But what your liver is doing is really a much bigger thing that we should be thinking about. And your liver can make oxalate from a wide variety of things. And one of the things it can make oxalate from is sugar. And so by that mechanism, when you eat a ton of sugar, even though sugar doesn't have oxalate in it itself, you're feeding that sugar to your liver, which is like, cool, I'm going to make more oxalate from it essentially. And then that oxalate gets dumped out in your urine where, of course, it can predispose you to calcium oxalate kidney stones. So I think that's really, really interesting to think about, right? And if we want to get even more specific, your liver is most good at making oxalate from a fructose molecule, right? There's a couple of different sugar molecules, and fructose is one of them. Of course, we find fructose in fruit. And any fruit is going to have a lot of fructose in it. That's the primary sugar that you find in fruit. And I always need to give the disclaimer that I am not saying that you should eat less fruit for kidney stones. We see in essentially every study that has ever existed that people who consume more fruit have fewer kidney stones. So that is not the fructose I'm concerned about. I do care about the fructose in high fructose corn syrup that we're finding primarily in those sugary beverages, which I mentioned earlier in the episode, that association between kidney stones and sugary beverages seems to be especially strong. And I suspect that that's related to the fact that sugary beverages often have high fructose corn syrup in them. That's the type of added sugar that they have in them. And that, again, that fructose is just really, really good at being turned into oxalate, driving up that urine oxalate. So again, fruit, totally fine. Please eat fruit. That is wonderful for your kidneys from so many aspects. But high fructose corn syrup in large amounts. I'm not saying this is this, demon ingredient that we need to avoid completely, but I think being mindful of it and minimizing it whenever it makes sense certainly makes sense, especially if you have high urine oxalate, or if you have high calcium, because again, that's essentially added sugar, and that could also be driving up that urine calcium. So that's why, right? Which I think is interesting. I don't know. Again, I'm a science nerd. If you've been around for a while, you know that. And I love to really kind of dive into the science of why things matter. Because I think sometimes that's helpful, right? When someone just says like, oh, eat less salt and it's going to help you prevent stones, you're like, what? Like, how in the world does salt cause stones? For me, at least, and for many of the people that I've worked with, really understanding that why behind is super, super helpful. So I always like to give that context. So the more action-oriented part of the episode is how much added sugar can you have? Because of course, the goal in nutrition is almost never zero. We are not aiming for zero protein. That would be insane and unhealthy. We are not aiming for zero sodium. That would also be unhealthy. We are also not aiming necessarily for zero added sugar. I say necessarily because your body needs sodium, and your body needs protein. It doesn't necessarily need added sugar. However, I would argue that for a healthy, balanced, happy life, you do need some added sugar, because trying to completely avoid it is just simply unrealistic, and also not necessary or fun. Because also, if you know me at all, you know how important balance and the ability to enjoy a piece of birthday cake or a Christmas cookie or a brownie on the 4th of July or your favorite Rice Krispie treat or whatever it is, right? Like that is so, so important. And if you are so militant and terrified of any ingredient or any aspect of nutrition for this matter, it does not just apply to sugar, I truly think that the stress that adds to your life of feeling afraid, or the stress of trying to find foods that meet all of these criteria that you're trying to all these ingredients that you're trying to avoid, or these criteria that you're trying to meet, I think the stress of doing that massively outweighs any potential health benefit of a zero added sugar diet, for example, right? Like I think we really have to take this into context, and we really have to be balanced about this whole thing. And so that is why I do not recommend a zero added sugar diet, because I want you to be able to enjoy life. And you simply cannot if you're aiming for no sugar ever, because it's just stressful and no fun. What's life without cookies, right? So there's actually no kidney stone specific recommendation for how much added sugar people should be consuming. But if you do have high urine calcium, and or oxalate, I think it makes sense to limit added sugar to somewhere between 25 to 38 grams per day. And I get that number actually from the American Heart Association. I just kind of stole their recommendation since we don't have one for ourselves in kidney world and certainly not in kidney stone world. So again, the American Heart Association says that we should limit added sugar to no more than 25 grams per day for women and 38 grams per day for men. I have no idea why they get so much more, but that's what they say. So we're going to go with it. So we'll make it easy and we'll say about 30 grams a day for most people, right? Somewhere in the middle there. And notice that I'm using the term added sugar because, again, sugar that naturally occurs in food like fruit, not of concern, especially when it comes to kidney stone prevention, primarily because those foods come with lots of other really, really wonderful things like vitamins and minerals and fiber, very importantly, that just a piece of cake or straight sugar that you put in your coffee or whatever isn't going to come with. And those foods are not associated with negative health outcomes, whereas sugar is. And when we think about kidney stones or heart disease or whatever it is, sugar is, this added sugar is. And so when you're looking at a nutrition facts label, what I care about most is you'll see carbohydrate and you'll see fiber, right? All in the same area. And you'll see added sugar. And then there's going to be a gram number next to it. And again, we're aiming for around-ish 30 grams per day for most people, no more than 30-ish grams per day of added sugar. Also, I always need to sort of give the caveat that sugar is sugar. White sugar, brown sugar, granulated sugar, honey, agave, there's so many different things, right? All of these things are sugar and they are not, they're going to do the exact same thing in your body. Sugar is sugar. All of those things should be counted as added sugar when you are looking to reduce the amount of sugar in your diet. And note that, again, this is not zero sugar. Like when you look at, say, a package of Oreos, for example, which is my personal favorite packaged cookie. Not sponsored. I just really like Oreos. I believe that 2 Oreos, do not quote me on this, has somewhere around like 12-ish grams of added sugar per day or per serving per 2 cookies, right? So that totally fits. If we have 30-ish grams to use up the whole day, like there is totally room for a little treat every day, especially if the other foods that you're eating don't have added sugar in them. I think oftentimes the problem is we don't realize that there's added sugar in the salad dressing that we're using, as well as the coffee creamer, as well as the spaghetti sauce, as well as, the bread, right? Like all of it does add up. And so if you're using up the added sugar in all those other foods, you're not going to have some extra left over for a cookie. And I don't know about you, I'd much rather use my sugar for a cookie than spaghetti sauce. And so my approach to this is I try to minimize the added sugar and all those other ingredients. So I do have a little bit left over for a cookie because I love some cookies after dinner. After the twins go to bed, it's kind of my me time. I can just like sit and breathe, right? But it's totally up to you, right? Some people don't need that or don't like that. And so they maybe don't need to be as strict about added sugar and other things. The point is sort of like sodium, right? I often talk about how you have a sodium budget. Same thing with added sugar. You have an added sugar budget and you can use it however makes sense for you. And you can also try to be more strict. If you maybe have diabetes or have pre-diabetes or are concerned about that, maybe you want to keep it even lower. But I think for most people, 30 grams-ish per day is a really, really great goal when thinking about that added sugar from all of the foods that you're eating throughout the day. So that is my summary of the connection and how sugar exactly causes kidney stones. Again, in summary, we know very clearly that people who eat more added sugar tend to have more stones. Likely this is driven by higher urine calcium and oxalate. Again, that oxalate being driven by liver production of oxalate from sugar, primarily fructose. We want to be limiting sugar to somewhere around 30-ish grams of added sugar per day. And sugar is sugar. Honey, agave, brown sugar, raw sugar, whatever it is. It's all sugar. It's all the same. We probably shouldn't be eating a lot of it, but a little bit is okay. So with that, I will close this episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. As always, if you have a question that you would love for me to answer on the podcast, I would love to hear from you. I'm actually working on recording my podcast episodes for the rest of the summer to really get ahead. So if you have any questions that you would like to get answered, please head to kidneystonepodcast.com and you can record your question for a chance to get answered on the podcast sometime in the next couple months. So thank you so much as always for listening, and I hope to see you next Wednesday. Thank you for listening to today's episode. For more help with kidney stones, check out my website, www.thekidneydietitian.org. For more personalized help from me, check out my online course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School. VIP enrollment includes help directly from me. I can't wait to see you there and help you prevent kidney stones. Have a great day.